Okay, welcome today to another Ask Andi. I have a question here from one of the parents that is on the call with me that is asking about what can be done to help a young child focus. The child that they're speaking of is 5.5 years old. So what I'll do is I will go through different strategies and stuff for younger kids at this age. I'll go through elementary, and then I'll go through high school as well. So some additional feedback too is we're looking with ADHD and ODD. So ODD is oppositional defiance disorder. I have some personal thoughts on ODD in that. So let's cover ODD first, because then that will help with what I'm answering on the focus front. So with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, I'm just going to tell you my experience with it and why I think the way that I think about it. So ODD is essentially that the child needs to control everything and feels like or seems like they're oppositional to anything that you ask them to do. They may, though, like with some of the kids, like I'm actually going to say that the one instance that I know is a child that was in my one son's class in his gifted program. And the teacher, I recall it, lovely teacher, and she has a child that has ODD. So she was actually quite confused as to how that child got into the gifted program. And the thing, though, because she wasn't able to complete any assignments, she didn't do any of the work, she didn't do pretty much anything that was asked of her. And I went on a school trip with them once with this girl, and she was smart. Her comebacks to me verbally, anything verbally to me, she could say things like she was on her cell phone all the time. And when I would mention things to her, her responses were so good. Like she was good. She was on it. She was able to say these things too. That I'm like, she's really, really smart. And I didn't at that time know about executive functioning. But now that I look back, and since I've been trained over the last year and a half in executive functioning, to the depth that I have been, I often thought of this girl with ODD. And I remember we were at the Science Center and they were at a space station, and they were supposed to be at their own little job, their own little terminal, their own little desk. And they had a little binder. She could not go over or read or do anything in the binder. And she was somebody that was actually being asked questions a lot based on what she was happening and the issue. There's the other kids were in another room that was like the space shuttle, and she had to be referring back to the space shuttle often what she was doing. She had rearranged her whole desk, moved things around, was basically, now that I look back at it, she actually wasn't being defiant and not doing this. Her brain didn't have the capability to do it in the way that we were asking her to do it. And so when you get with these oppositional defiant, quite often these kids are very, very smart, but cannot appear that way, do not appear that way with the way that the academics are asking them to do things, the way that they have to write out the answers, the way that they have to reply to the answers, because of the way that their brain is struggling with certain things. And then that starts getting into these outbursts and, running away or hitting things, or depending on the age that they're at. She was at this time grade 6. So, and it was just quite a struggle for everyone. And this teacher was phenomenal with her. And she still could not figure out those layers that since then I've actually brought to that teacher's attention about executive functioning. And it's opening her eyes to so much in these gifted kids, but this one individual as well. So when you start looking at the way that somebody's brain thinks, so we will go back to the focus part of this, because that's a big piece of the way that the brain works. And so academically, it's where they're They're really smart. They might be able to like be so observant of their surroundings and see things and put things together and associate things together. And they may, there's so many different ways that their brain could be working that all ODD kids can, appear different. There might be a subject that they're so into and so good at when they can do it. The thing is depending on where their brain is having these struggles. So is it in there? We're going to go through the base executive functioning skills, because people usually look at the high level skills. So when this girl couldn't plan and organize what she was being asked to do, she couldn't make decisions. Those are like high level skills. She couldn't analyze what was being asked of her and go through the steps and the instructions and generate, the responses that were needing to happen. Those are high level skills. So when we're asking a child to plan their schoolwork, do their homework, do these steps and all of that, those are high level skills. So we need to look at these lower level skills, which are your perception and attention. So sometimes with these ODD kids, or any kids that are quite often having outbursts, their perception is a little bit different. Their perception, the way that they are seeing things and perceiving things, sometimes they take it so internally. Sometimes they don't take it internally at all. Sometimes they don't perceive emotions as well. And so they don't get why they're not able to perceive that somebody is frustrated or upset. They may not be able to perceive that somebody is sad about what you said or hurt about what you said. So they can't switch those things. And if they're taking it so internally as well, that can start getting their stress system up and getting them amped up and getting them like feeling just really upset and angry, or getting really, really small. And then we get into attention. And attention is where are they hyper focusing on something and not able to focus on what they need to focus on? Because that can be different parts of the attention. And then we get into working memory. So we have verbal and nonverbal working memory. Quite often, especially in this girl that I know, her working memory was really, really struggling. So she could not open that book and go through the steps. That's your working memory. Being able to hold on to either words, directions, sentences, commands, what's being asked of you, being able to even just hold on to them. So we get into, even when kids are struggling to read, if they're struggling with phonetic sounds, then that can be, or with words you're saying, or remembering words you're saying, or remembering like one sentence, a couple of words, that can be your verbal working memory. Then we have the nonverbal, which is the images in your brain. So when you can't create images about things that are happening, so a simple thing, let's say crossing the street. If you can't have an image of seeing cars going back and forth in your brain, then you don't have that ability of foresight. You don't have the hindsight to be able to see those cars going by, and you don't have the foresight to be able to stop and go, okay, I need to look before I cross. And then we get to the next thing, which would be impulse control too. So they just quickly run across the street, right? So when you don't have that verbal, so I think of this girl at this desk, and I think how she was rearranging everything and moving everything. It was to be busy, and possibly to not even to stop herself from that feeling of not being able to go through her book, right? Of going through the book with the directions of what she needed to follow and what she needed to do of those steps. She couldn't visually see those words and follow those steps. And she couldn't verbally as well take in some of those words. So we get the verbal that causes a lot of issues. So when we're giving directions to our kids and they can't follow them, they may not be able to be holding them in that part of their brain. And so that's where we get a lot of anger and rage and frustration from these kids. Some of them mask it by getting angry at you because they're forgetting the steps and they're feeling stupid, and it looks like they're being defiant, right? So we start looking, these are just those base skills. So we have the perception, the attention, the working memory, verbal or and or nonverbal. And then we have the impulse control, the inhibition, the ability to be able to actually stop and pause before they react, to stop and pause and read the sentence. So they may be okay in their working memory, but they may not be able to stop themselves and pause long enough to actually read it. Right? So that might not even be an attention issue. That might be a inhibition issue, and a struggle to be able to inhibit themselves, to be able to stop and pause long enough to read the sentence. So that's where we get confused with a lot of these kids too, because maybe they can read, maybe sometimes they can follow steps, but then sometimes they can't. So then we think they're being defiant, when it's when the more stress that child is under as well. They could just be hungry, they could just be tired. That's something they could do the day before, something you told them to do the day before they were able to execute, and they can't today. Or they may not ever be able to do it, and always looking like, no matter how many times I tell you, you can't do this. And so they look like they're being defiant and oppositional or whatever. But it's that when they are stressed, their brain may not be able to have that function, that executive functioning part of their brain, the manager part of their brain can't manage it that day. So when we get into the ODD, that's where we need to start looking at these base skills. If we go back to those high level skills, decision-making is actually the hardest, most taxing skill you can ask of anybody. So if we think about dinner, if I'm going to ask you, hey, what do you want for dinner? You have to go into your verbal working memory, and you have to imagine every single dinner that you know, every single option that you have out there. And then you have to stop and go, okay, well, how do I figure out which of those dinners I want to say? And it's things like, what food do we have in the fridge? How much time do we have to prep that food, right? How much energy do I have to even put into this? So you then have to kind of figure out your criteria, and then go back through all of those images in your brain, and pull out only the ones that fit that criteria. And then you have to decide, okay, now how do I decide of all these meals, which one I'm going to pick? Like, it's crazy. Even when you go to a restaurant where you're not even having to cook or prepare or anything, when your brain is tired, when you're done, you most likely are going to go through a menu and go through the thing that you know, the thing that you're most comfortable with, the thing that you know, the thing that you're going to do. So quite often too, when we get kids that struggle with their executive functioning, they may eat the same thing more frequently, because it takes less brain power to just go and grab that thing and eat it than to figure out what the variety is. So really, like, decision making on anything, we have to go back to that verbal working memory, always get those images of all of those files we have of whatever the decision we have to make on anything. Like, even thinking, what time do I have to leave the house to get to school? Right? They have to sit there and figure out all of the things that they have. Well, the time, when do they have to be there? How long does it take to walk there? How long does it take to get all your stuff on? And they have to go through the process of understanding and going through all of those things to understand when they need to leave the house to get to somewhere. And you'll find that the more that your brain gets taxed, the harder that becomes, and then the later you become for things. And so any question you ask a child, any question that is asked for anything for decision, that you might think this is going to be easy, for an oppositional defiance disorder kid, for an ODD kid, is going to be like excruciatingly tough. And so it seems like they're being defiant when they're probably really struggling to decide that. There's times with my kids where I'll say, what do you want for dinner, this or this? So I give them only two options. So then they have to create two images in their brain. They only have to decide on two things that they want and pick one of those two. That is when it becomes easier, because anything that we do becomes a lot harder on that front. So that was a little bit big on the ODD part, and my understanding it from the executive functioning piece on that. So now, how do we help a child with focus when they're ODD and when they have ADHD? So first, let's do how I would help a child without the ODD. So what I would first be doing is when we think of focus, focus is actually not your ability to sustain attention. Focus is your ability to be able to refocus when your attention goes elsewhere. Okay, I'm going to say that again because this is super important for you to hear, is that a focus is not about the ability to sustain attention. Nobody can sustain attention for long periods of time. What happens in our brains is we're constantly thinking of so many different things going on, and it's our ability to keep refocusing ourselves on whatever we're supposed to be doing in order to be able to get that thing done and like appear like we're sustained focus. And so quite often when we're trying to work with these kids too, we're thinking of the wrong things. So refocusing. The one thing is that this is Amishi Jha, got her book, Peak Minds right here, from Amishi Jha's Peak Minds books. She's actually a neuroscientist on focus. And what happens in one part is that we get this whiteboard in our brain, and it fills up with so many things that we have to do in our day. So if we're looking at a kid, we're looking at a 5.5-year-old kid, the things that they can be saying is like, oh, you know, when am I going to be able to go and play with this toy again, play with Pokemon again, or go back to my Lego, or when am I going to be able to go and do this again, or watch TV or play the video game, whatever. They're constantly thinking about that. They might be thinking about something a kid said to them, right? The thoughts that they have going on in their brain, there's just so many. The thing is that as soon as we add in any types of screens, the amount of information that goes in the whiteboard like increases incredibly. So just even thinking of us, like how many tabs do you have open on your phone? When we're looking at a phone, there's all of these different apps to be looking at. Which one do we pick and choose? And then when we go, we push the button and it opens up to where there's always something on the screen, because it is somebody's job to keep you on that app. Somebody is paid big, big money to keep you on that app. So they try to get a lot of information on your whiteboard. Like thinking of Minecraft. Oh my gosh, my kids have 2 screens up. The one has all these numbers on it for longitude, latitude. I'm not even sure, that tells them where they are and the locations. And I don't even know what all the information is, but they have to store all of that information on their whiteboard. But then they also are watching the game on their other screen, and they're watching like who's coming in, what's there, what to build, what to find, what to do. All of those things go on their whiteboard from a video game. Like the amount of information on their whiteboard from a video game is crazy. For us on social media, just all the buttons, all the, you know, the likes, the constantly like Instagram, you think of all the feed that just keeps going, or it goes into like one reel to another reel to another reel. All of those get stored in our whiteboard. So with screens, that whiteboard gets filled so fast, and our focus is constantly be pulled in so many different directions. So the ability to actually keep your focus is unbelievable. So the thing that I do with my kids is that we do this breathing before they get on screens and after they get on screens. And they know that they have to do it. They have to do it or they don't get screen time. It's part of their screen time. And I've taught them that what we're doing is we're clearing their whiteboard as much as we can before we get on it. And then we're going to clear your whiteboard as much as we can when you get off, so that you're not like flying in that vortex of like, need to get on the computer again, need to go back there again, right? Which still is hard to do, I'm going to say, even with these, but it definitely does help. I've also been beta testing this recently with a group of women, of moms that are 40s, 50s, for in their perimenopausal stage too, to help with the focus, and they're really finding it beneficial. So it's all laid out actually in Peak Minds book, and then I've simplified it. So if anybody wants, I've got it all on a PDF and I can send it to you. But the first thing that we do, that the one for women, the first thing that the exercise that I get my kids to do is just to do basic breathing, and to tell them that I want them to solely keep trying to focus on their breathing through their nose. And nose is hugely important, because nose is, when you breathe through your nose, you're breathing in your resting system. When you're in your mouth, you're in your stress system. So I get them to do their nose breathing, breathe through their nose, fill their belly, and let it go. And we do that where they, what's it called? We do that breathing and they keep focusing anytime that their brain goes to something else. As soon as they notice it, they have to bring it back to their breath. And we start off with 1 minute. That's it. 1 minute. Work your way up to 3 eventually. And then the goal is actually to do 12 minutes. That's what Amishi Jha's research has shown, is that 12 minutes is the best. And that's what we do. So different things with kids. 5.5-year-old, I would take a stuffy, have them lay on their back, put the stuffy on their belly, and tell them to inhale through their nose and keep raising the stuffy up and back down, and keep thinking about that. That's how I'd start a younger kid. As they get older, I use apps. So I use, which one do I use? I use One Deep Breath, or I use Insight Timer, which I also have for Insight Timer how to do this, how to create it, or we just set an alarm. You can just completely set a timer on your phone for 1 minute and tell them to just do it for 1 minute. So if you want the apps that I use, let me know, because I have a doc that I can just send you. So email me support@andiclark.com, Andi with an I. So support@andiclark.com, and I'll send you, and it'll tell you the apps, the Insight Timer, how to use it. So yeah, that's what I would do with kids, especially as you're getting to teenager and stuff. I would get them before they do their homework. When they're in the middle of the homework and they're finding that their focus is fading, I would get them to do it again for like 3 minutes. And then I would get them to do it later. So that's how I would start with the focus, is teaching them that it's about refocusing. When you have a child that is ODD, they are going to need a lot more support without it seeming like support, because the demands placed on them is going to just send them through the roof. So what I would do is start with them, and this is something that teachers can do in a classroom, is called Find Your Flashlight. So I would teach them that we have this flashlight and the flashlight's pointing at something. So I would do this with the 5-year-old. And they could, depending if they're crafty, they could craft one, if they like a real one, or you can just use just a fake in your hand. There's my flashlight. And you start teaching them about focus and not focus. And you can just say, you know what? I learned that nobody can actually stay focused for long periods of time. Their mind actually wanders to other things. We just have to bring them back. So it's kind of like a flashlight. So if our flashlight's shining on our homework, or our flashlight's shining on eating our dinner, or our flashlight's shining on playing this game, then that's where we need to keep bringing it. But then we go, whoop, flashlight went over there. We have to bring it back. Where do we bring it back to? So you can start kind of playing games with them, and you start using the verbiage with them. Where should your flashlight be shining now? Or where is your flashlight shining is a good one too. Where is your flashlight shining? And they'll stop and they'll say, oh, it's thinking about Minecraft. And you'd be like, ooh, that sounds like fun. Well, where should your flashlight be shining now? And they could be on my homework, like, right. So, and you teach them that the more that you practice it, the stronger that part of their brain will get. And letting them know that this means that while they're doing your homework, you may ask them that. We'll see, with ODD, it'll be different. With another kid that you're doing this with, you can say, I might have to ask this to you like 30 times doing your homework, and that's okay. Because every single time, it's almost like being in the gym and lifting a weight for your muscle. So we're making that brain muscle stronger. So if I'm asking you this a lot of times, it's okay. With an ODD kid, you have to go way slower at such a different pace. It's going to be torture as a parent to be having to go as slow as you need to go, probably for that child, based on how they are. But you teach them about the flashlight, and you might only be able to do it with them once, and they might even get upset with you for doing it once. Then, the next day you might do it twice in their day, right? When you're working on something. Thing 2 is you're not doing it on everything. You pick one thing to do it with. So it could be, what could it be? Brushing their teeth, or it could be eating a meal, right? You choose the one thing you're going to do it with, and tell your kid ahead of time, especially with ODD, with PDA, pathological demand avoidance. It's really important for them to know why and how often it's going to happen, so that they're aware that it's going to happen and that it's okay. They'll probably be pissed at the start, but you let them know, I'm only going to do this during your dinner. I'm just going to keep doing it. If you get mad at me, you get mad at me. Like, that's okay. But I'll just do it once, and that'll be it for now. Eventually, I'll do it twice. And so once they start getting okay with doing it once, then you will even say to them, I've been doing this to you once and you've been doing really well. I'm going to start doing it twice. You may not like it at the start. That's okay. Totally okay. Right? I'm going to do it until you get used to it, like you did the one. And that's it. And so you just do it for the one thing. You don't do it for everything, because then that will totally overwhelm the child. And once they start getting used to it happening in that one thing, their brain actually will start doing it in other things as well. So I would be all about the flashlight often. Eventually you can get to 3 times. Eventually you can get to 4, right? So it will take you time to do that. And yeah, it'll definitely take time. And they may not like it, but that is the first thing that I would try for focus, would be trying that and the breathing, and see how it goes. Okay. Hopefully I answered that question. If you have any other questions, you can definitely ask them in the chat. And I know I had something that had popped up here. So one question that I do have, that I'll go over this question and see if you pop any more comments or feedback in the chat of there, and I'll answer that for you if you do, based on the focus that I just talked about. So the question that I do have is, why does my child act out more after something fun, like a birthday party or a play date? And that's a great, great question. And so we think of this like their nervous system. Let's think of this like a battery, right? And we think of a battery, and every time that something happens, that battery is decreasing. So your stress system doesn't know the difference between good things and between bad things. A stressor is a stressor. So if you're really, really excited about going to a party and then you're having candy, and sugar, that is going to keep draining that battery. You also have different interactions. So those are the good things that are maybe happening at the party. The thing is that for some of our kids too, there's a lot of stress at parties, a lot of stress at play dates. They may not be able to perceive very well how the other kids are reacting to them. So some kids will just talk and talk and talk and talk about a subject that they're interested in, that none of the other kids are interested in, and they don't notice, and the kids maybe don't want to hang out with them or don't want to do things with them. They may struggle to inhibit themselves, where they're always touching things or saying things or doing things that the kids don't want to hang out with them. And they know they're doing this. They don't want to be doing it. They don't know how to stop. And that uses cells of that energy, of that battery that they have. They may know that they need to be focusing better, and they're doing their best to try, and they can't. They may have such black and white thinking that somebody says a word they didn't like, or maybe there's pizza with the wrong toppings on it for them, and that just drains more and more of their energy, because their brain doesn't have a file for pizza with those toppings on it. And just to pick those toppings off is not in the file for their brain. And so they get stressed even more. There's all these things that can happen. There's them trying to always do the right thing, fearing of making mistakes, fearing of kids laughing at them if they do make a mistake, especially when, like, at a birthday party where there's different games and stuff. Some kids, that can stress out so much, and other kids totally thrive in it. Having interactions with other kids, maybe they're more introverted versus extroverted. that alone can just drain so much of their battery that by the time they get home, their battery is done. Their ability to handle and tolerate stresses is done, or they were masking it so much at that birthday party. Maybe there were loud noises and sounds. Maybe there were different smells there. All of those things they might be masking that once they get home, they fall apart, right? So what I say, birthday parties and play dates, same thing with play dates too. They might have been, given junk food and stuff that totally set them off. There's so many things that could be happening at play dates and at birthday parties that we don't realize are stressors for many of these kids. And it just constantly drains that battery that by the time they get home, the kid can't hold it together anymore. And they're done. They're just absolutely done. Okay. All right. Do we have any other questions for today? If not, then I will sign off. If there's anything based on what I did say, if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. Anybody has any questions with these Ask Andys, just let me know. You can email me, support@andiclark.com, ANDICLARK.com, and I will answer your call or answer your questions for you. You can book a one-on-one call with me as well, and I'm more than happy to hop on a call, answer all of the questions that you do have. All right, take care, everyone, and have a great day.